It's a pleasure to be here with you. Building trust through the intersection of data and technology is really of utmost importance in healthcare. Often in healthcare, the data scientist, such as myself, acts as the trusted intermediary between key stakeholders, including doctors, patients, and insurance companies. So today, I'm happy to share with you my experience acting as sort of this trusted intermediary, and so let's get started. So first, there are many reasons why we need to build trust through data and technology in healthcare. Importantly, data and technology are ubiquitous in healthcare and have the potential to provide high-performance, data-driven medicine that can optimize care trajectories, suggest the right therapy for the right patient, also known as precision medicine, and improve the process of clinical assertions and decision-making. And in medical practice, where a lot of my research is focused, we see technology helping with disease diagnosis, treatment selection, patient monitoring, and risk stratification models. Now, importantly, all of these technologies require a team of scientists, a wealth of data, and a trusted network or a trusted intermediary to connect them together. But trust is something, of course, we know that is built or developed over time. Unfortunately, healthcare is no different from any other industry where data breaches are common. In fact, recent reports suggest that there's been an increase in data breaches and misuse of data in healthcare, and people are understandably weary about trusting entities with their personal health information. In fact, according to a few surveys, over 80% of consumers are concerned about how entities use their healthcare data they collect, and more than half of the consumers don't feel they're well informed about what companies plan to do with their data. Furthermore, as I mentioned, there have been significant data breaches, and I just want to highlight a few that have been really in the news recently. The first is Google, and Google is working with Ascension to collect and analyze patient data in a project known as Project Nightingale. Now, this data source collects health data on over 50 million patients nationwide. And they are buying and selling this data without patient consent. And this has raised a lot of concerns with the community, particularly privacy concerns. Second is Blue Cross, Anthem Blue Cross. So in 2015, it's been the largest data breach for healthcare data. Over 80 million patient records were stolen. And the third is UCLA Health, where last year they had, or 2 years ago, they had over 4.5 million healthcare records stolen. And even worse, these data were not encrypted. So the hackers got in, got the information, and they could, do what they want with the data. So healthcare data breaches and misuse of data affect hundreds of millions of people and eroded the trust of patients and physicians, and that affects how we can use and connect with these different entities. Now, another important factor that chips away at the foundation of trusted intermediaries, particularly in healthcare, is trust in the data being used. I want to go through two real-world examples that demonstrate how, in the past, technology and data in healthcare have disappointed many, particularly vulnerable populations. Let's start with the first example of bias in data used to develop technology to stratify patients with heart failure symptoms. Now, randomized controlled trials for treatment of chronic heart failure are the basis of clinical assertions, clinical guidelines, and practice patterns. However, these trials have been dominated by white males. It's been published, we know that. And really not long ago, we didn't know that symptoms of heart attack look different in women compared to men. So as you've likely heard, the COVID pandemic is presenting a disproportionate impact on minorities in terms of infection rates, hospitalizations, and mortality. And many believe that technology, in particular artificial intelligence, is a solution that can guide clinical decision-making in this novel disease. However, there's been a rush to push out technology that has resulted in the rapid dissemination of underdeveloped and potentially biased models and technology that may actually exacerbate the disparities gap. And in fact, a recent systematic review of COVID-19 technology uncovered serious shortcomings, particularly in regards to potential bias and how alarming how widespread these potential limitations were found. And so there's an urgent need to really balance the rapid dissemination of technology to address these urgent clinical problems, but also making sure that the technology we develop are unbiased, of high quality, and truly benefit all populations. Working as a trusted intermediary, my group is developing guidelines and frameworks to augment the trustworthiness of data and technology in healthcare. So let's talk about a framework that we develop to try and address some of these issues. This morning, I want to talk to you about how we act as a trusted intermediary in healthcare. I feel that my team and I often do this to mediate interactions between providers, patients, data, and technology. And the way we gain trust across these third parties is through a framework of evaluations to ensure data integrity and model transparency in order to develop and deliver fair and equitable healthcare solutions using data and technology. So let's start with stakeholder engagement. Stakeholder engagement ensures you are asking the right questions, or a question that can be answered with the data you have and the technology you can build. I think the first step in developing trust among different constituents is really stakeholder involvement. It's important to understand what stakeholders should be involved throughout the design, development, evaluation, and validation of any technology. Successful solutions must be developed through a team effort involving knowledge experts, design experts, and end users. Beneficiaries are also an important stakeholder. Knowing the beneficiary involves understanding who the technology is made for and who it will be used by. So data quality can be considered as a broad field that identifies data characteristics that are important to both data custodians and data users. And we kind of think of data as fitness for use as guidance. So we must think about data quality as a cornerstone for ensuring robust technology. Without data quality, it is hard to make a high quality decision. In fact, a minor defect in data quality can lead to various negative impacts. This is particularly true in the medical domain because bad data quality could harm the life of a patient. At Stanford, or in my group, I want to give an example of quality assessment for mortality data, which will be similar to the question we heard on palliative care. So mortality data is not well recorded in our electronic healthcare records. Let me give you an example. So at Stanford Healthcare System, EHR, mortality is captured, but it's often missing. The problem here is that the variable is not well captured in this tertiary care setting. So what we have is we have patients come to Stanford for definitive treatment, but they might return to their hometown after treatment. For example, they come from Fresno, they come to Stanford, have their very specialized treatment, and then they return to Fresno after treatment. So if that patient dies in Fresno, often that information is not reported back to us. So what we have is we have a lot of missing information in our healthcare system. So when we're trying to develop technology based on mortality data, we need to really think about the missingness and how data is censored. I also want to talk about important biases that we see in the data. So my group at Stanford performed a systematic review of demographic data and the representativeness of machine learning models created from electronic healthcare records. In an attempt to appraise an AI model's sample representativeness of the population to which it would be applied, we looked at technology for type 2 diabetes. So in the papers we reviewed, we found only 25% of the papers included population demographics in their technology development. And among those, white and African-American populations included in the training data were similar to type 2 diabetes. However, no study reported Hispanics in their training data. This raises great concerns, giving Hispanics higher prevalence and complication rates for type 2 diabetes compared to whites. So it's unclear how a technology developed for type 2 diabetes that does not contain Hispanic populations would fare more broadly in nationwide healthcare systems. So in our framework for building trust through data and technology, we must talk about model development and evaluation. Now, I can give a whole class on this topic, but I want to focus particularly on developing technology that is fair, therefore technology that is trusted and welcomed by all stakeholders. So when we talk about technology that is fair, certainly in the world of machine learning and artificial intelligence, we talk about algorithmic fairness. And a key difficulty in developing fair technology is that there's no universal notion of fairness that exists. Many different definitions have been proposed by researchers over the years, and they can be broadly regrouped into these three categories: anti-classification, classification parity, and calibration. However, these three classes are by no means an exhaustive list of all the work that's been done in this field. Rather, they're the most prominent concepts that have been coming forward. So let's talk about these. Let's talk about these. So anti-classification, or fairness through unawareness. The first definition of fairness requires the exclusion of any protected attributes, such as gender or race, in the outcome modeling. An even stricter notion of anti-classification would be to require the omission of any protected characteristics that are proxies of protected attributes, such as attendance to a same-sex school or weight and height as proxies for genders. This can be impractical, as removing all possible proxies may leave you with very few predictive useful features. Also, it's often hard to know whether a particular variable is a proxy for a protected characteristic without further data collection and analysis. Let's talk about, say I develop a technology that is to be used to triage high-risk patients, and its poorly calibrated risk estimates lead to false expectations with end users. And this can be either patients or healthcare professionals. This can lead to poorly defined decisions in anticipation of an event or absence thereof. Let's think about in vitro fertilization treatment. Irrespective of how well a model can discriminate between treatments that end in live birth versus those that do not, it is clear that strong over or underestimation of the chance of a live birth makes the algorithm clinically unacceptable. For instance, a strong overestimation of the chance of a live birth after in vitro fertilization would give false positive hope to couples going through an already very stressful and emotional experience. Treating a couple in reality who has favorable prognosis exposes a woman unnecessarily to possible harmful side effects, such as ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome. So you can see why addressing fairness across technology is very important for creating a trusted environment. Our last topic I want to discuss is transparency. And I want to talk to you about some work we've done with my colleagues to set forth a standard for minimal information necessary to understand intended predictions, target populations, and hidden biases of clinical decision tools called MiniMAR. MiniMAR is developed through a framework that we need to be very transparent on the population from which data are required, model design and development, and model evaluation and employment. So given the fast evolving pace of AI solutions in healthcare, regulating them is complicated, and global efforts are emerging to safely and effectively standardize this regulatory task. However, through lack of incentives, restrictions around data sharing and data privacy, and the acceptance of stealth science in industry, we have created a healthcare environment that shows technology can be disseminated and deployed at point of care without really understanding a lot about how the model was developed, where the data was coming from, and how it performs across different populations, as I previously mentioned. So I'm going to quickly go through these slides in trying to keep on time, but the 3 points here: population settings requires information related to the population from which the study sample was drawn, the study setting, the data source, and cohort selection. We want to know information about patient demographic characteristics. So if you're training an AI model, we want to know who was used to train that model regarding their age, gender, race, ethnicity, and social economic status. Regarding model architecture or development, we need to be very clear and transparent about what is the model output, who is the target user, what data splitting criteria were used, how was the gold standard created, what's the particular model task and model architecture, which features were used, and what's the missingness of those features. And model evaluation, really, we need to know the details about how the technology was optimized, what was the internal validation and external validation, and we want to see code and data shared if possible. So to summarize, my team and I are developing and testing a framework to act as a trusted intermediary and mediate interactions between key stakeholders, including patients, clinicians, IT experts, UI experts, insurance companies, etc. Our goal is to build fair technology that enables precision medicine. We're looking to build technology to identify the right treatment for the right patient that prioritizes patient-centered outcomes and care goals, technology that can enforce evidence-based care and population representativeness, and technology that can predict rare events across diverse populations, aggregating data sources and developing fair models. There are many pitfalls and solutions for developing a trusted environment. As I mentioned, engaging stakeholders is key. You need broad domain expertise when starting to think about the design and all the way through the deployment of technology. Data quality is crucial. Understanding biases and representativeness in the data used to develop technology is key to developing the trusted relationship. And developing fair technology and evaluating bias and fairness in technology is important. And that includes transparency in reporting this information and the dissemination of this information. So to that end, I want to end with this notion about equality and equity. So ethical analysis of technologies in healthcare demands that we take a view of fairness, or more importantly, justice, that centers on the health and lives of people, not the outputs alone. So a lot of historical medicine has been influenced by white normality, which is the basis of many of our medical facts. And so while it's important to use this information, it's also important to develop models that focus on equality, meaning that each individual or group is given the same amount of resources? Or do you shift that attention to say that that equality is more important, where equality suggests that each group is given the amount of resources needed to have similar outcomes? Understanding how to develop and implement a technology that provides both equity and equality presents a paradigm shift in the way we think about trust through data and technology.